The New York Times is suing OpenAI and Microsoft for using its stories to train chatbots. The Times alleges the two companies are advancing their technology through the unlawful use of its work to create AI products that compete with it, threatening the Times' ability to provide that service. Artificial intelligence companies scrape information available online, including articles published by news organizations, to train generative AI chatbots. Joining us now to help unpack the lawsuit and the ramifications of it is James Czerniawski, Senior Policy Analyst with Americans for Prosperity. James, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
The Times is saying that AI companies are unlawfully using the Times work to create AI products that compete with it. How exactly are these AI companies using their material, and what products are they creating to compete with the New York Times?
Yeah, that's a great question. So basically, what OpenAI does with its large language model is that it scrapes publicly available information that is primarily in text format. So web articles, any kind of website blogs, more broadly speaking, posts that might have been put on like a social media website, etc. And it goes and conglomerates all of that into its database to go and analyze and then produce a result for the end user based off of a query there. So that does include, pieces that are publicly available from the New York Times and other kinds of outlets as well. It's worth noting that OpenAI has also gone and done licensing agreements with other news entities as a result of that. So there's that consideration that this lawsuit is just another way of the New York Times trying to go and force its hand to get more value out of the deal that it thinks it's trying to get from OpenAI and Microsoft for using their work and product. But ultimately here, the kinds of things that are being developed, like when you're looking at ChatGPT, is it creating a journalism product? Not so much. What it is it's an answer engine, right? So if I want to know what's a good resource for creating like a workout regimen or whatever, I can put that into OpenAI's ChatGPT and it will produce a result that goes and actually shows me what that looks like. But it draws from multiple resources. And that normally has been understood as like a fair use because it's not necessarily just copying verbatim word for word something that a particular article has done. It's pulling from all of that knowledge to create a customized result. So it's something that's a little bit different than everything else that's out there. And what this lawsuit basically attempts to do is saying that simply reading or even summarizing articles that are from the New York Times somehow invokes their copyright claim, and that is violation of the law, and that OpenAI should be, getting fined and paying money to the New York Times for this. So it's a very interesting case, and if it were to go and prevail, I think that it would have negative downstream effects, not just for OpenAI, but for the AI industry more broadly speaking, and then ultimately the end user who has been benefiting quite massively from having access to these tools.
Yeah, so if the court were to rule in favor of the Times, what impact would that have on the AI space and those end users who are using products like ChatGPT?
Yeah, that's a great question. Basically, what it comes down to is that you are creating a regulatory moat, if you will, but this time via compliance, for AI companies to go and have to use this data within their models because you basically have to pay to play. And that creates a lock in effect that OpenAI can certainly afford with its billions of dollars from Microsoft, and Microsoft can certainly afford because of its $2 trillion market cap. But the smaller companies and the open source AI community that is working on products that interacts with the end user will go and certainly be hampered in their ability to go and develop new products. And then for the end user, they are worse off because if that's the case, it's going to be a lot harder to go and get data into models because you're going to scrutinize it more heavily to make sure you're not violating copyright law. And that means that it's going to take longer to update the models to have the most up to date and relevant information that matters to the user. And that it's going to take longer for rollouts in general of new products and features of AI because it's not working with as much data and processing as much as it otherwise could. So this could be very hampering for both the company side of the equation as well as the end users.
Well, and you make we have about 40 seconds before we go to break, but you mentioned the possibility of keeping market competitors on the sidelines because it creates a barrier to entry. Is there a consolidation effect if the court rules in favor of the Times here?
I think what it does is it creates a discouragement from other entrepreneurs in this space from wanting to get too big to draw the scrutiny towards them from a New York Times or any of these other publications that are launching an avalanche of lawsuits against these big AI companies right
Mhm.
now. So there's definitely a very big and real risk there.
We're back with James Czerniawski talking about the New York Times lawsuit against Microsoft and OpenAI. James, before the break, you mentioned some of the consequences if the courts rule in favor of the New York Times. But what if they rule against the Times? What will that mean for publishers in the United States?
Yeah, I think it means more or less of carrying on with the status quo, right? Let's make no mistake. Journalism has been struggling in the United States as well as around the globe. I think it's been noted for its decline in viewership and subscription numbers. That's held true for the Times as well as the Washington Post and other outlets. But also, it's important for them. It serves as an opportunity, I should say, for the New York Times and the Washington Post and these other news outlets to think about. Don't think about AI as a threat to your business model, but think about how you can leverage the technology and integrate it into your business processes to improve how you're going and conducting your journalism. AI is not a substitute for journalism. I think you know as well as everybody else that journalism requires a lot of investment in time and other kinds of resources that AI just simply can't go and replicate as easily. It can regurgitate old information, but it's not going to go and do sourcing and some of that other stuff as well as a regular human journalist can do. But it can automate other parts of their job and make it easier for them to do quality reporting looking forward too. So instead of trying to go and waste money on lawsuits and force companies to have to deal with legal battles, what they should be doing is trying to figure out how the technology can be promising to enhancing their industry more broadly speaking. And there's some really good opportunities there, I think, for news reporters as well as newsrooms more broadly speaking to figure out how AI can go and help improve their processes.
So this is essentially a copyright claim. The Times is claiming that they own the words on the page outright. But one would assume that the court ruling here, depending on where it goes, could have a significant impact on other sectors outside of publishing. What do you see as the major consequences for maybe other sectors if the courts rule in favor of the Times on these copyright claims?
Yeah, I think the biggest threat that comes to the digital economy, more broadly speaking, is the notion of fair use, right? We kind of talked about it during the last segment, but fair use is when you are going and using this, existing work that's out there, but it has been transformed in some rhyme or fashion. So it's not a simple, reproduction without attribution or compensation. This is something that's a little bit more than that because it's something that's unique to you. We've seen this happen in the music industry all the time where people are suing one another, claiming that they have stolen other people's work to go and produce songs. Ed Sheeran was notably involved with a copyright lawsuit just a couple of years ago. And the same kind of thing happens here. The
Mhm.
creator economy that relies on people, looking at this kind of content, summarizing it, giving it engagement. By the way, this actually benefits the New York Times and other outlets when people are going and referencing their reporting in their kind of content in this fashion. So if the court were to go and rule in favor of the New York Times, the biggest losers are again going to be the end users and then the entire creator economy that's popped up over the last 5 some odd years that has really benefited from being able to use fair use to go and cover all these different topics that these newspapers have gone and covered and engage with users in a different way than perhaps the Times or other outlets might want to do so. So really that's your biggest threat here is the creators that go and leverage fair use might all of a sudden get into trouble because they were summarizing an article from the New York Times or from the Washington Post or
Mhm.
elsewhere, and then they could get sued for that and have it taken down, which means that there's less speech online overall, and that would be an unfortunate consequence of this lawsuit.
Where do you see the AI space moving going forward? And I ask that in the context, Microsoft has announced they're going to launch an AI button for their computers on the keyboard. So how integrated is this going to be into that end user's experience?
Yeah, I think that it's going to get integrated into many different facets of your daily life. Artificial intelligence can go and help with the monumental tasks that we're facing in terms of on a business level, from streamlining certain internal processes, but then also it can help like families with the most basic things of setting up a grocery list, going and having an ability to go and navigate food allergies for your kids, to go and help screening cancer patients to see whether or not the tumors are
Mhm.
shrinking or if there is in fact cancer in somebody. They was at a great experiment where they were using AI to go and scan retinal data to determine whether or not there was a potential heart disease, which is one of the leading causes of death for men. So there's actually every single industry that's going to be impacted by AI that's going to have some kind of net positive, I believe, on average, effect for the end user here. So there's a lot of promise, and I would hate for people to get lost in this doom and gloom scenario of AI taking our jobs or killing journalism. That's just not what is actually going to happen, in my opinion.
James, thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Stay with us. When we come back, we'll be looking at your top headlines from around the world. So stay with us. Forum Daily will return shortly.